So thanks for coming to Analyze Boulder 38B. We have a special guest tonight, Omer Trajman from Rocana. He'll be talking about a lot of stuff. Going to give you a nice little rundown of pretty much everything else, right?
Yeah, everything I know in 1 hour.
A few introductory statements. As always, we like to say thanks to the people involved. So we have Tony, who is normally our MC over there. She's decided to let me come back to the MC podium for one night only, so you get me. Diana in absentia, Jordan over there, and Greg. Where's Greg? Greg right there. Greg's a new member, so thanks everyone for helping out. Galvanize, we always like to thank them, especially the girls that helped set this up tonight. So big round of applause for them. We also want to give a big shout out for the data science track from Galvanize. We've had, what, 2 or 3 presenters, I think, from them, and they're absolutely top-notch presenters. If the presentations are any indication of the quality of students they're graduating, it's an extremely high-quality program that they're doing. We actually had one last night. They do have a mailing list, so make sure to get on that. We want to thank the Boulder BI Brain Trust and the in-house. Claudia, do you want to say something about that? Come on over. Yes.
Hi, I'm Claudia Imhoff. I'm the founder of the Boulder BI Brain Trust. It's a consortium of independent analysts, consultants, there's one of our members, and experts in this area. If you're interested, it's free. We bring in companies like Omer's here. About every Friday, for Saturday, to technology. And I know a lot about the technology tonight. We will tomorrow. It is for independent analysts, consultants, and experts. If you're not one of those, you can subscribe. Okay? bbdp.us. Thanks.
Thanks, Claudia. And also, thanks to Dave. Something you all may not know about this setup that you see here is this is actually something that Dave dictated to me. Took us a while to get the live stream up and running, and Dave was instrumental in helping us to understand really how to do that, because it's actually harder than it looks. And then lastly, big round of applause for Omer for presenting tonight. And of course, to all of you for showing up. We do have a Slack channel. You can email uxtony@gmail.com. Tony will add you. We have a LinkedIn group for jobs. You can find local employers looking for people like you at our LinkedIn group. Just search for Analyze Boulder. Twitter @Analyze Boulder. Please also copy tonight at Rocana Inc. @OTryman. That's Omar's, and hashtag BBBT for the Boulder BI Brain Trust. Help us out with some pics and tweets of tonight's
Actual tweet with that one.
Yeah, that doesn't leave much to say, you're right. That's on purpose. We are in our fundraising campaign. The Analyze Boulder beer has been bought for everybody for the last 3 years by a generous grant from the Colorado Startup Fund Community Grant, but that is now out, so we're raising money. If you enjoyed tonight's event, you like the beer, please consider going and making a donation at gofundme.com/Analyze Boulder 2016. We would appreciate it. So this is what tonight's event looks like. Normally, you see more presenters than this, but we're trying out a new format, which we've never done before, which is a long format, and Omer has generously agreed to be our guinea pig. We have high expectations. So we are at the beginning. Omar's going to present, and then afterwards we have beer for about 70 people. So I expect you all to do a lot of drinking. And that's all I have to say. So I'm just going to go ahead and let Omer take it away. I got it. Greg's got it.
Thank you for the great introduction.
Should be good.
So I'm going to give a talk tonight all about buzzwords, as you can see on the screen. Not really. I'm actually going to explain what I mean by these things. I do want to thank the amazing marketing team at Rocana. I kind of sort of verbal diarrhea what I wanted to talk about, and they came back with amazing slides. So hopefully these are informative. A little bit of background. So I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've worked at startups my entire career, going back almost 20 years. I started the current company Rocana about 2.5 years ago with Eric Samrin and Don Brown worked with me at Cloudera. Before that, I was at a company called Vertica. Basically been doing things in and around the big data space for about a decade. Before that, worked on applications, point of sale systems, on healthcare systems, struggling with 10 gigabyte Oracle databases that would load pages, and that built up the pent-up frustration to go and solve data management problems. But applications is really where I love to focus. I'm going to talk a lot about different things that can be done with data, but not necessarily data management problems themselves. Most of my career, once I got kicked out of programming and at Vertica, I wasn't allowed to code anymore. I spent a lot of time with customers. So whereas if you kind of go and do the one-on-one tour in Silicon Valley, you get a lot of startups building cool tech. Most of the world, most of the companies that provide us with all sort of the services and equipment that we use are not the web companies. They're not what we think of as the digital natives. These are companies who benefit most from the kinds of technologies that we developed, and that's where I've spent most of my time is sort of helping everyone else on the planet understand how to do all the cool stuff that folks like Google and Amazon and Facebook are doing. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. When I'm not traveling, which is mostly weekends, I call Vermont my home. It keeps me grounded. It's kind of a nice place out of the buzzword-laden areas. And I also, I'm a big fan my entire career of challenging assumptions. You'll see some things today that hopefully are by design topical. If you disagree, if you have questions, if you want to challenge them, I encourage it. I'm here as much to learn as I am to share my experiences. If this is one way, then it's kind of only half the bandwidth that we actually have today. I'm not going to talk a lot about Rocana, and if you want any information about us, I'll take it around afterwards. But very briefly, we're a fully distributed company. There's about 55 of us in 20 some odd states and Canada. Fully distributed, we're no offices, no permanent offices whatsoever. Again, by design. We've been working with some companies you may know from an ecosystem and partner perspective. And I've had some both analysts and press recognize the work that we're doing. And we've built some pretty cool technology. I'll talk a little bit about it just in reference today, but as Justin said, I'm not going to talk. So what do I spend my time that I'm not working thinking about? A few things, and these are buzzwords, but there's a lot behind them. So I spend a lot of time talking to folks about digital transformation. Have anyone heard that? Anyone have any idea what it means? Give a guess. Like, what would you call digital transformation, other than buzzword?
Sort of is transactional, normally be done another way.
So digitizing business transactions. And I think it's absolutely right, and it has been for some time, this process where we've taken manual or paper processes and kind of used machines to automate them. What we're seeing now is almost the next evolution of digital transformation, which is where we're removing the human entirely from the process. So you could see a digitization of, say, I go to a bank, I deposit a check, and it's done entirely on paper. Now it's done by computer and scanned. The next step of digital transformation, I just take a picture with my phone, no bank necessary, or no actual physical location necessary. And that's a big part of what sort of the rest of the world, sort of the Fortune 500 is thinking about today and trying to figure out. Most companies are not sort of the Amazon style digital natives that started on the web. Most companies are tens or over 100 years old. They still have these manual business processes that just went through the first stage of digital transformation. And that feeds into this other thing that people are struggling with, which is IT agility. A lot of people use the term DevOps when referring to this. We think of DevOps more as a method of achieving IT agility, but ultimately, if your systems, if your business is running on technology, you can only move the business as fast as IT can keep up. And so the adoption of cloud, the adoption of rapid deployment, of continuous integration type of technologies are all around how do we get IT to keep up with the pace of the business wants to move at. I spent a lot of time talking with folks about that. And next step beyond that is kind of the actual fundamental role of IT. You'll hear me talk about this a little bit today. IT traditionally, and if you go back a decade or two, and in fact, if you go into some industries today, IT is still the printer and fax, right? It's who I call when my email doesn't work. It's not the person actually running the systems that are making it, right? Which is very different from a company like Google or a company like Facebook. There is no sort of second-class IT. Like people who work in technology in those companies, they're responsible for dollars. And that's a very different world that you see if you're in tech than the rest of the world living in. Right? IT, and even IT people themselves, you go and ask them, well, what does the business do? What does your role do? What is it every day that you're responsible for that impacts the business? They have no idea. And so the role of IT from the CIO down in actually enabling digital transformation. Why is IT agility important? We talked to folks a lot about that, and I think that's probably the biggest change that's happening in the world today. This is sort of the Mark Andreessen calls it software is eating the world. This is the side effect of that. I think a lot about open source. I've been a big proponent of open source for quite some time. I still remember Joe used to work at Vertica. You'll know this. My last few months at Vertica before I went to Cloudera, I just railed like crazy. We got to open source this. And now we're 5-6 years later, and how many open source analytic databases are there today? So I'm a big proponent of what open source can do. It's a double-edged sword. I like to say that open source is free as puppies, right? So you can get it for free, but you do all the work. So I'll talk a little bit about how I think that plays into digital transformation and everything else. And then finally, machine learning. People here are familiar with machine learning to some extent. I've got some strong opinions. I'm not going to be shy. Any questions about that? I like questions in the middle. You don't hold them to the end. Like there's something that you're like, I have no idea, or I completely don't believe that. Everyone's bought in. This is fantastic. It's going to be the easiest talk ever. All right, first bold statement. I believe technologists are going to run the business. If you look at most companies today, that's not true. There's a business person. There's an MBA. There's someone who came up through sales, or came up through marketing. There's a finance person. There's a supply chain person, right? That's how business is structured. We're still living to some extent in the Mad Men era, where businesses are driven by gut. I look at the market. I talk to some customers. This is where I think we need to go next. And if you look at the most valuable companies today, does anyone know? If you kind of stack rank the Fortune 500 by market cap, the top 5 or 6.
Apple.
Google.
Apple, Google, good. Facebook. Amazon. They're all on here. Microsoft. Uber's not public, and they probably would be in the top. ExxonMobil kind of fluctuates there. GE, right, run by computer scientists. China Mobile, within the top 10. These are companies that are run by people who don't think of technology as an afterthought. It's not the business must do this, what technology is available to enable it. It's this is what the market needs, what technology needs to exist. And it's a very different way of thinking. These companies are much newer than most of the rest of the Fortune 500. You don't see Johnson & Johnson in the top 5 or in the top 10. They think of the world differently, and that's part of the reason they're valued so highly. It's part of the reason they've been able to succeed in changing the world the way they have. These are companies that think first of what are people doing and what needs to exist in order to enable that, in order to enable the next step. And part of that, I contend, is because these digital native companies have what we think of as operational visibility, and they use it as a competitive advantage. And what I mean by that is they're not doing market surveys, they're not doing focus groups to try and figure out what their customers want. They watch it. As they look at the behavior, they instrument everything. These companies understand what's happening day to day, minute to minute, second to second, and use that information not only to make the immediate experiences better or the operations better, but understanding where to move the company forward and where to make investments. And they're not right all the time. They're probably wrong as much as everyone else is. But they make those changes and they make those bets a lot more quickly, and they, they'll drop them, they'll cancel them, they'll fail faster in that sense. The challenge here is that move fast and break things, like the Facebook motto, is perfectly fine when you're serving ads on a social network, not so fine when you're depositing agents. I don't like that breaking. I don't like it changing that much, right? I want the repeatability. So how do you marry the world of sort of this digital native see everything to the traditional world? That's kind of when we talk about the challenges of the next stage of digital transformation, of IT agility and the role of IT. That's the domain that we're thinking about. And it's based on this kind of fundamental premise, or sub-thesis, if you will, that companies that have a traditional view of IT, people who continue to think of IT as just the folks who fix the printers, they will die. They will be blockbuster. Right? And what's fascinating, actually, the history of Blockbuster, they were an incredibly innovative company. They were doing market research to understand which movies to put in which region based on local preferences. They were managing an amazing database, marketing database in the 80s. But the technologists ceded to the business people, and Netflix made the bet that Blockbuster wasn't willing to make. Look at what's happened to Yahoo, right? They had the opportunity to buy Google, and they lagged them. And they made the bet way too late. They didn't understand from a technology perspective where people were moving. Now, Google wasn't right all the time, but they've been right much more so than that. Thesis number 2. So, if it's the case that visibility is the key competitive advantage, if being able to see everything that's going on is what allows businesses that are run by technologists to understand where the market's moving, the next step is that what we think of as monitoring. Is the system up? Is it doing what I designed it to do? Is going to be replaced by operational visibility. And so the era of I built a dashboard and defined static thresholds, and that's the way I decide whether my website is up, whether my storage system is running, whether my network is connected. Right? Those are no longer just the equivalent systems of the phone and the printers and the faxes. Those are now fundamental parts of the business and are informing it. And the reality today, if you go talk to most IT teams, say, well, what are you doing? What do you see? What are you missing? Most of them are driving blind. For most people, when we start digging in and saying, how much do you understand what's going on versus everything that's happening in your business, they quantify it as maybe 5%. I know 5% of what's going on in all of my technology systems. And when there was a person who worked for the company, right, a help desk or a customer support person, and that's the system I was supporting, that's fine. They could call me, they could work with the customer on the phone, I could fix the system. I didn't have to have visibility into everything. But when the person on the other end of the system is a customer, and that customer is going to just go somewhere else if the website doesn't work, no one's going to call me. 5% doesn't cut it. Now, when you think of this in the context of IT agility, of cloud, of microservices, containers, ephemeral instances, being able to scale up and scale down, software-defined networking, right? Everything that, in theory, would allow IT and businesses to move faster, this picture gets even murkier. Because if today I have 5% visibility into a static system, and now my system is dynamic, what I think of as the network architecture, the connectivity between my web server, my app server, my storage system, and the network routes in between, if that's constantly changing, and I've got a 5% snapshot, I'm literally flying blind at that point. I don't know what happened yesterday when the outage was reported, and there's no way to find out. I just have to cross my fingers and hope that I'm at the console and it happens. And so this gap between digital natives who built the systems with the instrumentation, with the monitoring in mind, with the visibility, they can run this. Facebook can run these kinds of systems. Google, even though they have outages, they can run these kinds of systems. Most of the world is still running mainframes, right, and trying to put clouds in front of it. So how do you connect the dots between those two systems? The visibility challenge also, if you look at it and kind of put real words and text behind it, right? You now have these sort of endless array of sources. No one is exclusively on-premise. No one's exclusively on cloud. There's lots of managed and unmanaged endpoints at this point. That's where all of your data is coming from. That's informing how the systems are performing and what they're doing. At the other end, you have stakeholders. Everyone needs access to these systems. IT needs to see it. Security teams need to see it. Lines of business. This is how the data gets from point A to point B today. Every single one of those endpoints for every single vendor, for every single system, has a different monitoring tool. If you're familiar with the world, and I'll dive into this in a second, but if you're familiar with the analogy of like data warehousing, right? You have a warehouse and you have data marts. IT is running on data marts, basically. And what's worse is that those are not necessarily end-user tools. Some of them give you functionality. Some of the tools on the left-hand side here, you can, stakeholders can access directly. Some of them need to go through a translation layer where you lose even more granularity, more stability. So this leads me to thesis number 3, which is inevitably technologists are going to deploy their own. This is the logical evolution, and you can see I'm kind of walking further out on the limb here. I got a lot of nods on the first thesis. I'm getting slightly fewer nods every time. But this is what I believe will happen. And the reason for this, I like to look at history a lot when I try and figure out how markets going to react to change. The reason I was railing at Vertica about open sourcing systems, I looked at how MySQL started taking over from edge use cases for systems like Oracle. It's kind of inevitable that if you have a community with specific purpose and they're willing to share openly, that's going to develop faster than any single company. Right? That's why open source is going to move faster. Similarly here, when I look at businesses, and you made a great point about digital transformation. What happened when businesses started to digitize? They realized that now they had the ability to collect that information, start to understand, analyze what's happening across the business. You don't have to take a bunch of pieces of paper and put them in, a manual spreadsheet and do math by hand, or enter them into, a VisiCalc spreadsheet online. You can actually collect that data in an operational data store that was taking the feed from what was happening inside the business, no longer on paper, and feed it to a centralized data warehouse and look at the impact of supply chain. This is where you look at the evolution of companies like Walmart and where they succeeded in optimizing their entire delivery system. And a lot of that is driven by a central warehouse where they could look at end-to-end. They didn't have to be vertically integrated as a company. They could look at what each of their suppliers was doing, all the way down to who bought it and when, what they bought it with. The myth, and I don't think this is ever an actual story, the diapers and beers, right? You all heard this? Right, this is the idea that people looked at buying trends and decided to put the beer, diapers at the end of the aisle next to where the beer was, because the guy gets sent out in the middle of the night, like, I gotta come out of diapers, I might as well pick up a six-pack. I don't think that actually happens, and most stores are run that way. But the idea behind it is we looked at what people do and what's related, and then use that to optimize the business. One of the great retail successes that came out of warehousing in retailing on sale. If you're familiar with Catalina Marketing, anyone know that company? Catalina is a real estate company. They sell the real estate on the back of receipts. Right? They basically give you the system and then sell coupons to CPG companies based on what is being purchased at the time, right? You tally up all the purchases, and the receipt comes out. That can be dynamically proven. And all of that is based on collecting that information, warehousing, and running through houses. That's where businesses have optimized to the point that they have today. IT, I mean, anyone here work in IT? Anyone here work in a data center, or has, or knows anyone who does? It does not work that way, right? You go and you cut $100 million checks to your vendors every single year, and you don't know if what you need, if you're getting what you need or not. You don't know if it's impacting the business. And you compare that to companies. There's a company that we work with. This is a gaming company, and with online gaming, latency is everything, right? If you have a differentiation in latency, then one person's going to basically be killing the other person's going to log off and join them. But latency is extremely expensive. Where you put your points of presence and how you optimize your network, that's not cheap. So looking at what does an extra millisecond cost me in terms of player experience and in terms of revenue is a warehousing problem, but it's fundamentally an IT systems problem. And it's those types of applications, those types of use cases. It's every second latency you get on a website load, or every time a shopping cart doesn't complete or forgets your session, you lose a customer. You lose the lifetime value of that customer and all the marketing dollars you try to get them. Those are all IT warehousing problems. Those are all IT analytics problems that impact the business directly. And that's what's going to drive it. Put another way, current state of IT marketing, IT operations, and we think of this in kind of 3 dimensions, is from a depth dimension, how much detail do I have from any given source is artificially limited by the monitoring systems available today. How long I keep it. Today, if you ask the average retail CIO, are they ready for Black Friday? Are they going to have a Nordstrom moment, or do they know that all their systems are in check? They'll say, I have no idea. I see 7 days. I can't tell you what happened last year. I can't compare year. And they don't have that duration. And then from a breadth of sources, they're looking at 5% of that data. People are not looking at everything that's happening on the network that's connecting every single device between every data center and every cloud and everything. So I promised I'd get to open source, and this is my 4th thesis, which is that I think open source is going to be the foundation. If you look at the evolution of the internet, what's made the internet possible today, we couldn't afford to deploy the scale of web servers, the scale of edge devices, the kind of interactivity that allows people to wander around chasing virtual Pokemon, right?
I was the only one that
we couldn't do that if we were running on, AIX and HPUX and cutting massive checks to Sun, right, and IBM, and every edge device was, another $100, $500 Windows license. In fact, the world just couldn't function. We couldn't have that scale. Technologies like Linux, Java, PHP and Python, that's what made this possible. It's what made it affordable. Open source is now starting to make its way through data management, right? It's made its way through compute, it's made its way through operating systems. Data management is next. And if you're familiar with any of the buzzwords here, especially things like Hadoop, like MongoDB, these are changing the game in terms of the scale, the duration, the depth, the breadth, across many different industries, and it's going to be critical from an IT operations perspective as well. People familiar with these words? Anyone? Does anyone here not know any? And it's okay, right? It's the Zoom. Flink is, people would say Flink is kind of what Spark should have been. It's a different approach to in-memory real-time processing. It has different primitives that make it easier to do things like window isolation computation. But think of it in the same category as Spark. But there, I mean, this is a small, like there's hundreds of projects at ASF.
There's Mongo there that your flavor choice in SQL.
It is not my personal flavor of choice for NoSQL. It's not Rocana's choice for NoSQL. We actually don't use a NoSQL system in Rocana. Went through a whole process with that. Happy that probably after. My next point. So the application of open source, and I'll answer that question of what we use. So here's the challenge with open source. It is very fast moving, right? We used to joke at Cloudera that an open source project is not solving a real problem if there aren't 3 different open source projects trying to solve that problem, at least. So, so there's definitely a lot going on. Again, for most companies, right, remember, we're not talking about the folks at Facebook who like co-locate recruiting with Stanford, right? They just rip them out of the programs. Right, most companies employ folks who are average, right? The average person works at the average company, has the average degree and the average, sophistication with these technologies. They're not sitting there on the mailing list trying to figure out, the latest version, what is Flink, right? Most people don't know, because that's not the point, right? They've got a network to run, they've got a database system to manage, they've got, I don't want to say real work to do, but they got to run a bank. It's a different kind of job. Those companies are not going to be able to just go into the open source well and benefit. It's just not going to happen. The same way that it took a company like Red Hat to go from bookstore to open source distribution to I can actually buy and use Linux just like I could buy HBucks or AIX, but significantly cheaper. It's going to take the same kind of thing from a data management perspective. And what I would say that specifically in data management, open source is going to show up more driven from an application perspective than a platform perspective. So you're not necessarily going to get I'm just going to buy a bunch of Linux and then figure out what to do with it. It's going to be, I'm going to buy an application that happens to rely heavily on open source as a competitive advantage, and then I will benefit from it. And so, for example, at Rocana, we don't necessarily go into, these are all if you want to know all the guts of what we do, happy to talk about it. But we solve a problem for you. There's proprietary software in it. You buy it like a product. We happen to benefit from not having to build our own event data bus, because we can just use Kafka to do it. So we rely heavily on open source. We pick and choose, and we hire the experts to pick and choose which components need to work together. But then you, as a consumer, can just rely on us benefiting from that and passing those benefits and those savings on to you. So I can charge a lot less for my software because I'm paying a lot less. I don't have to build a full stack. I can use a lot of open source. And in fact, when we compare ourselves to our competitors, we don't market open source specifically, but we market the advantages of this. We use open underpinning. You can get under the hood, and you don't necessarily need us. Once we write a file to disk, you can read that without any Rocana IP at all. You can just go and read it, use open source format. And that's not true for our competitors. And that's a benefit to the customer, but it's a huge benefit to us because we don't have to meet the whole community. So that brings me to thesis number 5, and the BBT is not going to be happy about this one. I believe that the end result of all this is that BI, classic business intelligence, is going to be the enterprise equivalent of SNEM. It's the manual process. Right? This is the slowest, it's going to be the slowest possible way to figure out what's going on in a business is what we take for granted today. I got no nods at all. Like I've reached. I got one nod? Okay. Excellent. What replaced it? So let me walk down that path. So you're familiar with Watson? Right, Watson's now the smartest shepherd player on the planet. So here's how I get to that conclusion. One, and I don't think this is as much challenge. Some people will challenge this. They'll say big data is not useful. You want small data. I assert data gains value as you capture and analyze. The more data you have, if you can use it, more data will always win. Because the chance that you're missing the signal, the chance that you didn't see the first time the event happened, goes down. The chance that your algorithm isn't accounting for a variable that's actually the causal relationship or even the correlator relationship goes down. So more data is more valuable, as long as you can do it affordably and open source. Yes?
Like, the point you made about BI, what I use now right now for our people who still checks and notes from my children. And those two things, for whatever reason, they didn't really check. They need to tie into some old system. But the notes from my children will always be that way, and I can see BI or tying the old way of it's a connection that are created from data that might be created from disparate sources.
So BI becomes, sorry, I was going to play it back.
Yeah, attempted.
That's what I'm going to, sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. I wanted to play it back before I forget it. So you're saying snail mail today is good for checks because the systems haven't been updated, and for notes from your kids because it's about forming a connection.
There's more can be happening so that you say, oh, link disparate sources.
I would argue that even linking disparate sources is going to become increasingly automated. I don't think BI is going to go away.
Right.
I think it's going to look more artisanal, right? Right. It's just like a snail mail. Like you don't print artisanal BI. Yes, I said artisanal BI. Correct. Organic. It's certified organic. But right. So the reason behind that, right? If you believe that more data is more valuable, I'd also argue machines are better at making sense of more data. There's a caveat to this, but I'll get to that in a second. Just recently, like, Go is considered one of the hardest games for machines to play, right? It's very pattern-oriented, which humans are very good at. And yet, I believe the reigning champion, or on its way to be the reigning champion, is a machine built by Alphabet, by Google, that uses deep learning and kind of genetic algorithms to compete against itself in more games of Go than have ever been played ever. Right? You use deep learning to train a bunch of systems, and then you make them fight, and you do that with the massive power of Google, and suddenly you can play more Go games in a day than humans have ever played, and you will win. And they are winning. But, and this is the big but, machines don't necessarily know what to do. Right? You give them a bunch of data. This is like when I used to sell Vertica and Cloud Air to folks. I'd walk into, so you install the system, you turn it on, and it just sits there. Like it's not doing anything. It has no idea what you want. It has a lot of capabilities and a lot of power, but unless you tell the machine what to do, it's just going to sit around waiting. Machines perform specifically data-oriented tasks, like tasks that you can improve with more data. They do it better, but under human direction. You get into a Google car and you sit there, and it's not going to do anything. You tell it where you want to go, and it'll probably get you there safe, right? And forget Google cars for a second. How many people use Waze, right? Or Google Maps, which now use Waze, right? It's telling you where to drive. It's telling you which direction to go. I don't even think about pulling out a map anymore. I just say, click on the calendar, invite, and drive there. And the machine's going to figure out the right way to do it. And if there's an accident, it's going to route around that, right? The machine can process more data as I'm driving than I could probably do with days of preparation. So where does that lead us from an analytics perspective? There's no BI. There's no BI in the Google Cloud. You don't write SQL queries while you're driving to kind of figure out, the optimal fuel, right, as a vehicle. And this is where, just for sheer laziness, I stole some Rocana screenshots. But I believe analytics is going to be purpose-built or purpose-centric. So most people in the world are not data scientists and never will be. Most people are not analysts and never will be. They're not going to learn SQL or Python or PHP and all those great languages. They're going to expect to come in and use the same interfaces and tools that they use today. Today you go in and you enter the field from the check, you scan the check, and you press the button and it gets deposited. You don't need a human to do that anymore, but you still need humans to make decisions. But those are going to be driven by analytics that the humans aren't necessarily aware of. We do really fancy math in Rocana. We look at hundreds of thousands, millions of data points constantly. And our users have no clue. I mean, we'll tell them, right? But they don't know how it works. They don't understand what piecewise linear regression is. Right? They don't understand how to keep all this stuff in memory. They don't understand even the sources of most of these systems. But we're able to tell them the activity and the interesting changes and the most important ones because we've done hard work to figure out what analysis to apply. And that, I believe, is going to exist in every system. That's what BI will change into, is someone who understands the power of BI and understands the domain is going to think about it, is going to build it into an application, is going to use open source in order to make it cost effective to do at scale, and then deliver to the business and tell the business what to do. And the person who is leading that charge will be a technologist. And what you're going to have is, this is sorry, I gave the example order for the slide, but what you're going to have is these kinds of systems where I can interact, like, there's no real training manual for Rocana. There's no language to learn. You install it, you point, syslog and rest and whatever at it, you install some agents, and it just lights up. And we built that system based on all of these ideas, right? Based on these kind of 5 theses on digital transformation. And I think that's going to be everywhere. I'm going to leave these up for a second, see if I can get more nods towards the end, see if I have more questions. Audio.
Okay, I'll push back on the slide. What's your definition of BI?
My definition of BI is the process by which someone decides, here's the data I need to make a decision, finds it, here's how I need to analyze it, here's how I need to visualize it, and iterates on that process annually.
Very narrow.
That's a very fair point. So BI redefined. Maybe. I think, yeah, and I guess the reason, it's meant to be a topical, right? I think of it, yeah, very classic, like even Tableau, right, which is a fantastic tool that very accessible, still requires a lot of manual iteration thinking.
I don't disagree with that, but I don't think that process will go away. I don't think all of that is cheap in my life. I think there's still trying to see what
and that, I think that, yeah, that's a fantasy. I don't think it's a debate we have time for. That's a debate I'd love to have because I do think it's going to move faster and in different forms.
I want to be at that.
Yeah, all right. We can do it as soon as we wrap the formal Q&A.
I'm curious about point number 1, technologists will run the business. I mean, when I look at the types of companies you put up there, they all have a certain characteristic, and that they're easily leveraged through technology, like Google, Amazon, Facebook, they have certain character. But there's a ton of businesses out there that don't have that easily leveraged talent, like the hospital, right? And so I think the frame just seems a little bit broad.
It is, and it is on purpose, and I think those will change too. So hospitals, yes, will probably be the last to change. But if you think of the potential for personalized medicine, and it's very disconnected and very much in pockets. Actually, there was a recent article, and I'm not going to quote it, but I'll reference it because I don't remember all the details. But there's now a collaboration between Google and Glaxo and GSK, specifically to try and figure out areas where technology can have more powerful impacts than the classic methods of drug discovery. I think that will change too. If you, in the fullness of time, put a technologist in charge of hospital care and have the ability to rethink it and do it sufficiently carefully so that you're not harming people as much as you're helping them, I think you would radically change care in unexpected ways.
There was reference to the idea and I'm wondering to what extent data cleaning and transformation are part of that annual. That's why I was laughing.
It's a huge, I mean, how much BI is data cleaning? You ask the average data scientist, they say, no, my job's a data janitor. I need to, like, the actual analytics is easy. It's the cleaning part that's hard. And this is why I think it's going to show up in the form of applications. Because applications will have constrained problems that they solve where they can do the heavy. It's not general purpose, I don't know what data I'm getting. It's, I have an application that's solving a specific problem. There's a constrained world of data that can come in certain forms, and I can handle 90+% of it. There are companies, there was some research that Joe Hellerstein, Mike Stonebreaker did around sort of the relationship between machine learning, human interaction, and appropriate visualization. And both Trifacta and Tamer they each founded a company based on those concepts around what's actually possible when you let machines do most of the work, but it's directed, with the right visual interface, it's directed by humans, rather than the way we do it today, which is painful. Data cleaning today, extremely, it's 90% of the work. What if it was 10% and the machines did the rest? Yeah, you're sticking a knife in and twisting it. Yeah, that's exactly what analytics is. All right, so what if you could highly automate it?
The very first one is technologists will run the business. I'd like to hear your thoughts on how technologists will care for users differently than
Analytically?
however you like it.
No, analytically. That's, I think, the answer. I think when you approach it from a tech mindset, you need to have necessarily the influence, sort of the Mad Men influence, the creative side to it. But ultimately, the creative side, success was determined by careful measurement and analysis. You get lots of, I'll go back to Facebook. Facebook does a lot of creative work. They introduce a lot of new ideas. They agonize over it. Everyone hates them when they change things. But everything gets tested. They'll take a small fraction that's representative of the user base. They know it's representative because they have all the data. And they'll A/B test it. Google's constantly running. So every time you go to Google, it's probably slightly different than it was the time you just loaded the page. So you'll know not by user preference, not by implicit. Let me mix these up. You'll know not by asking the user, but by watching how they actually react, and by taking the creative and running a bunch of tests and seeing which one actually works. Right? That's kind of the key. Very data-centric mindset to it is let's try it and see. Yeah.
I'm curious, things. Two, what do you define as operational visibility? I saw that, I thought real time, the simple as that.
I would define real time as whatever the business needs to operate. If you're a gaming company, milliseconds. If you're depositing checks, they have to clear within a few days. So less than that. It is highly, highly business dependent. In a hospital, right, real time is different in the OR or in the ICU than it is in long-term care. Actually, I was talking to a doctor about new sleep apnea machines, where you can now take it home, plug it in, it runs an algorithm to self-adjust, and if it detects sleep or breathing patterns outside the parameters, it pages the doctor, right? And real-time paging the doctor who can then log in and tweak it is sufficient real-time because it's faster than calling 911 and having the EMTs show up who are not experts in it and bring them to the hospital. So real-time is anything less than however many hours it takes for that to happen. It depends on the business. Yeah, I hate the term real-time, just because it's so ambiguous.
You can think of a better one.
Effective time. Yeah. Fast enough to have an impact.
So you have mentioned source, you mentioned also limits, great areas, everywhere, really accepted. My question is, what do you mean by DSD?
About DSD?
Yeah, DSD. Future.
As a personal preference?
Personal business.
Personally, actually, I prefer it. I don't know that I've asked the question enough recently to have a read on the market. Yeah, I'm trying to think the last time I asked. I think apps tend to find their home. Different stacks will end up getting optimized around different things. So you'll probably find, people tend to run OpenStack on their client because Canonical supports it and it's easy to install, and Red Hat went their own way. So I think it will vary by stack, not going anywhere. It's a fantastic system. Makes a little more sense to me than it says. That was not an answer. This is an I don't know. If you think up questions later, if you want to just call me out publicly and say that I have no idea what I'm saying, or that Rocana should not be sponsoring me to fly out here and talk about silly things, or if you're curious what Gartner thinks about us, there's some stuff there.
Omer, could you go back one slide? Yeah. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on, when I look at all of these, I was thinking of this earlier too, all of these have different pieces culturally in terms of society. You said the first one, everyone was nodding their head yes. The fifth one or two were nodding their head yes. What is your thought on how that is changing as technology changes? Is it speeding up to keep up with it in terms of people that are in this type of industry or in this mentality versus everyone? Or is it not keeping up fast enough? Now I'll use the analogy of government regulation and technology.
I think it's expanding and compressing. People don't necessarily want to change. Like, people don't want to change. Right? It's comfortable. You can optimize. You can build highly successful and valuable businesses by getting really good at doing things the way you do things. And then someone comes along and changes the game for you, and all of a sudden you got to play catch up, or they win. And so I think we saw over the past decade that people were leapfrogging, and now everyone else is reacting, and it's going to start compressing. So when I talk to CIOs today, they say they find that their executive team, their peers, are much more tech savvy than they ever have been. Like, you're much more likely to find, geeks in the C-suite who run Linux at home, or hack their machines, or have learned to code than you ever have before. And that kind of compresses the dynamic, and some people get left behind, some people catch up. And then people will go through this 5-10 years, however long it takes. Everyone will kind of optimize around it, and then someone's going to come up with something.
Do you think that is something that separation? You see that getting to a point soon, and I don't know how to define soon, where you'll hit a point where you'll be kind of cruise control in a way, and people will continue to catch up, but that separation won't be there, or do we have a ways to go?
I think we have a ways to go. I think we're 10 years into 30-year process, maybe. So 10 more years to catch up, and then 10 years of cruise control, and then something else is going to. And you mentioned, sorry, I was thinking about this. You mentioned government. Even governments can change it. Right?
I only use that as an easy analogy.
But it has definitely been different vehicles and different structures and departments in the government that have been established to move faster in areas that need to move faster. There was something just today or yesterday about how the FAA is not going through their standard process around drones, because if they did, they just couldn't keep up with drone tech. And that people would be less safe if they followed the same regulation and process they went for, like commercial aircraft, than trying to kind of come up with a new list for change.
Yeah, and it is always changing. I was curious in the current state.
Yeah, I think we might be getting to the point that people are catching up, but they're still far from cruise control. I think there's, like, just by virtue of this, I think we'll hit cruise control when everyone believes it's fine. If everyone believes, when Claudia agrees with me that, artisanal BI is a relic,
I agree with that now. I don't agree with
fair enough.
Are there any final questions? 5 months? 20 points? All right, well, we have the room for a little while longer, so let's stick around, drink some beer, and you can pick Omar's brain or